Hey guys, welcome to Crater Mania. I'm your host, the man they call Crater, and I'd like to welcome you all to my final round, round 5 of Schwarzenegger versus Stallone, here in my 500 Movies in 2025 series. And as always, for this episode, this will be movies number 202 through 205. And this has been a lot of fun. And if you tuned in to last night's episode, um, you may have noticed that Schwarzenegger has already won this series with a commanding lead of 6-2. So the winner may already be Schwarzenegger in this series, but I'm still going to talk about these other movies tonight. So it doesn't matter who the winner is. We're still going to talk about some great movies tonight. And this doesn't have to end here. I could always cover more movies later on the channel from Schwarzenegger and Stallone because there's so many more movies from those guys that's out there. A lot of great movies, a lot of bad movies too. I got to be honest. As much as I love these guys, they don't all put out great movies. But there's just so many ones that are great. They're out there that I can still talk about. So you know, regardless of Schwarzenegger already winning this particular series from this week, it doesn't matter. The war never ends between these two guys. They're always going to be battling of who is going to be the greatest action star of all time. Um, Now, as far as battling for my favorite of all time, I think I've finally settled that after years and years of contemplating. Just kind of because I've never done anything like this before, where I've watched all these Schwarzenegger movies and Stallone movies, in one period of time, back to back, and just the ones that I have chosen for this past week. Um, it just helped me really kind of compare them a lot as actors and to see what I liked most about each of them and what appealed to me more than the other. And I have to say that after years of kind of going back and forth, just seeing these two guys as equal as my equal number one favorite, I have to say that Arnold is probably my favorite of all time now, and so you're hearing that first here on the channel from me. Just something that is a particular, aspect about my life. I'd have to say that Arnold is the goat when it comes to my all-time favorite actors. I think, and just by doing this little project, this little experiment, by watching these movies like I am, it's really helped me, come to terms with that. And that's what's so cool about doing this channel and watching all these movies and talking about them and stuff. It helps you appreciate, these actors and these movies and these directors and everything that's involved with these movies, a lot more as you watch them over and over, and then you talk about them, here. With you guys, or just really just with myself, just on here. But I talk with you guys sometimes when people are here in the chat. So and hell yeah, man, Soup Bean's in here. What do you know, Soup Bean? That's my friend James. So he says hell yeah. So that's right. And speaking of hell yeah, just got done watching SmackDown tonight, and that was a really good episode. So it ended, of course, John Cena coming out there and kind of like talking his shit and all that on Randy Orton, because tomorrow night's Backlash. So Randy Orton, John Cena is going to be fighting on there, and someone threw an empty beer bottle in the ring tonight at John Cena. So that's the first time I've seen anything like that happen in wrestling in many years. So I kind of wonder if that fan that threw it, was maybe a plant, or if he was real, did he get kicked out? I mean, does it really matter at that point? Because it was the end of the show. You know what I mean? Um, but good episode tonight of SmackDown. So there was a really good match tonight between the Street Profits and what's Nathan Frazier and Axiom or something like I think is his name. I'm still not really familiar with those guys. I know they're from NXT. They're getting ready to be called up to the main roster. But man, that was an incredible match between those two. Um, James, my dad would agree. My dad's a huge Steven Seagal fan. It's like one of his favorite. And I'm the complete opposite. I'm not a Seagal fan at all. I mean, there's a couple movies I might could watch. Like I like Fire Down Below, obviously, because it was filmed here in this town that we live in. So yeah, I mean, but there's very few Steven Seagal films that I even actually like. Um, but I gotta be honest with you, I probably won't ever review any of his movies here on the channel. But back to what I was talking about, the whole Schwarzenegger and Stallone series that I did this week. This was a lot of fun just watching all these movies from going from Schwarzenegger to Stallone to Schwarzenegger to Stallone over and over and over. And like I said, I did 10 movies of Schwarzenegger and 10 movies of Stallone. Something I've never done before, but it was, is a hell of an experience. And it put a lot of things in perspective for me and really helped me figure out that Arnold is now my number one favorite of all time. He's the GOAT when it comes to, action movies and just, actors that's in my heart. So, yeah, hell yeah. Long live Arnold Schwarzenegger. But let's go ahead and jump into this episode and talk about these movies tonight. So the first movie that we're going to be talking about is a Schwarzenegger movie, and it's not one of my favorites, but I absolutely love this movie regardless because where there is just so many Schwarzenegger films out there that I love. Definitely do have my favorites. Um, I don't know. This one might be at least in my top 10. Um, do I see what, James? Do you see this? I see your chats if that's what you're asking. I'm not sure what you're talking about, man. Um, but let me know. Let me know. Yeah, Arnold's go. Arnold, I'm goated. That's right. Let's get to the chopper. But yeah, man, like Arnold Schwarzenegger is so yeah, he's the goat in my opinion. He is, and back to this movie that when we talk about tonight, this first movie. Like I said, it may be in like my top 10 Arnold films. I don't know. I'd really have to think about it. I'd have to think about it for sure. But it is one hell of a movie, and it's not only got Arnold Schwarzenegger, but it's got Jamie Lee Curtis. It's got Bill Paxton, who is another one of my favorite actors of all time. Tom Arnold is in this. So I don't know if I mentioned the name already, but this is True Lies. So True Lies came out in 1994. And so just picture this. So you've got this guy named Harry Tasker, who's played by Arnold here, and to the outside world, and especially to his wife Helen, who's played by Jamie Lee Curtis, and his daughter Dana, who's played by Eliza Dushku from Buffy the Vampire fame, Buffy the Vampire Slayer fame, where she plays the character Faith. But she's much younger in this when this movie, like I said, this came out in '94. But just to the outside world, his wife, his kid, Harry is just um, the the most boring computer salesman imaginable. He wears these like beige suits, drives a sedan, travels a lot for conferences, and just seems, very mundane. And this is the performance that Arnold gives us. This regular guy, which in itself is just kind of hilarious because we know who he really is here. And here's the twist with that. So Harry isn't this computer salesman at all. He's actually this top secret, like spy, for this place called the Omega Sector, which is this kind of covert, U.S. intelligence agency, dealing with international terrorism, nuclear threats, and all kinds of cool spy stuff like that. Um, and he is the best of the best. He speaks multiple languages. He can kill a dozen guys. In a bathroom stall. Hangs off helicopters. And he looks, damn good in a tux while doing it. So, and this is the Arnold that we know and love. That macho charisma that he brings to the table, and the core genius of this movie um, is just the clash of these two worlds. Where his wife Helen, she's bored with her supposedly like really dull life, so she starts looking for excitement, and she falls prey to this greasy wannabe spy named Simon, which is played by Bill Paxton here, absolute legend Bill Paxton, and his character is probably the best character in this whole movie. Um, but because he's scamming these women by pretending to be this secret agent, and Harry, being this paranoid super spy that he is, he quickly uncovers this, and instead of just confronting his wife Helen, he decides to use the place that he works for, the Omega Sector, and its resources to investigate and kind of hilariously like spice up his marriage by giving Helen a taste of this spy life without telling her that it's real. Um, so this plan goes just absolutely wrong, leading Helen to accidentally get mixed up with these real terrorists that Harry has been tracking, and they're this group that's called the Crimson Jihad, and they're led by this guy named Salim Abu Aziz, um, and suddenly Helen is just thrown headfirst into Harry's world here, this dangerous world, by just first thinking it's some kind of this elaborate like role playing game set up by her husband, but then she comes to the realization that this is really this horrifying thing. This is very real, and their daughter Dana also kind of gets snagged in the whole chaos of it like later on in the film, and just kind of bringing the whole family into this whole uh, circle of chaos. So True Lies is just a massive, you know, high action comedy thriller. I mean, it's all over the place. That just kind of juggles these multiple genres. It's a spy thriller, with these kind of serious stakes. A lot of really cool action sequences, and then at the same time, it's also this kind of domestic, comedy drama, rom com. About a this marriage hitting a kind of a rut, and just there's these the secrets that people keep and stuff. It's a romantic comedy about kind of rediscovering your partner though as well. It's really just a whole multiple genre celebration. So from a fan's perspective, it lets Arnold, be that ultimate action hero that he always is. Very tough, resourceful, just capable of kind of these impossible things, and just while also kind of showing off his this kind of surprisingly effective, comedic timing that he has in a lot of his films as well. Especially when he's out of his element, dealing with these kind of domestic issues, or trying to orchestrate Helen's mission. It's his delivery of these lines, that he has in the movie, just as always, are just it's pure gold. Or just there's that whole like exchange that he has with his wife Helen, just potentially being this killer. It's so good. I mean, it just works so well. And him and Jamie Lee Curtis just have this amazing chemistry throughout the whole film. and there's just it's really something else, and it's really cool because, like, I mentioned this when I was talking about Cliffhanger, Sylvester Stallone movie. There was a lot of advertising for Cliffhanger in like comics and just on TV, and and just other like types of merchandise and stuff. The same thing as we said here with True Lies. Like True Lies, the advertising was like everywhere: magazines, comic books, on TV. There was there was a Super Nintendo game of it, just like how there was a Super Nintendo game of Cliffhanger, and yeah, just a lot of money was put into this movie, and and for good reason too, because the director here is the legendary James Cameron, who had worked a few times before with Arnold. So we knew that pairing, coming back together after they did the Terminator films together, this was going to be a hell of a film. And Bill Paxton, who was also kind of a James Cameron regular, also brought back into this and True Lies. And just James Cameron, we've talked about him before, but let's go down the list. Terminator, Aliens, Terminator 2, The Abyss, Titanic, the Avatar movies. Um, James Cameron is just an absolute legend when it comes to filmmaking, and his films are always like big and like over the top. You know what I mean? Like he has these huge budgets. These very complex productions. He pushes a lot of boundaries. And hey, Pop, what's going on, man? I'm glad to have you in here. Happy Friday to you. Yeah, we're talking Schwarzenegger and Stallone here. Now, this is the final round. Schwarzenegger versus Stallone. So, talking about some really good ones tonight. We're on True Lies right now. Just in the middle of talking about James Cameron, what an amazing, legendary director he is, and just, I mean, that was what was just come to be expected with True Lies, because when you James Cameron was already a legend of the '80s, and now going into the early '90s. He just and that would even go even further too when he would do Titanic and the Avatar movies and all that. But just this pairing once again with Arnold, I mean, it was just like instant money. You know what I mean? Just like it was just they knew that they had a hit here on their hands. Especially with everybody else was involved too, like Jamie Lee Curtis and all that. But like I said, he pushed boundaries. He was just kind of constantly developing, or utilizing a lot of cutting edge visual effects and filming techniques, and just his action sequences are often amazing. They're fucking killer, and just how they're staged, and just um, just amongst all the chaos that's going on, he really builds tension like few filmmakers do. Um, and just like I said, pairing him back with Arnold again was just, a perfect fit, especially for this story that he was presenting here, because James Cameron really understands, Arnold's screen presence, and how to use that physicality, and that kind of unique delivery that Arnold brings. He didn't just cast Arnold as another Terminator character. He crafted this role that kind of played with Arnold's image, forcing him into these kind of new scenarios while still letting him, unleash these iconic action hero, aspects about himself, when necessary. Um, and just their whole collaborations that they do together is legendary for a reason. And just True Lies is just an amazing result of that partnership. Um, James, you said if we do the straight stream, you'll. Oh wait, I missed one of your comments. My bad. See. Oh, you were talking about Steven Seagal when I was Fire Down Below. So he stayed in the house below yours when they filmed it. That's really cool, man. Like I know Devin Combs, our friend Devin Combs, he was in the movie. He was like the little boy in the movie, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but uh, but that's cool, man. Um, but where was oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so like I said, James Cameron, fucking killer director, and just overall filmmaker, and just pairing them to pairing him together with Arnold once again here is just it just makes sense. They knew what they were doing when they partnered up. They knew this movie was going to make a ton of money and be really successful. Um, but just the True Lies is this prime example, of how to kind of successfully blend this like high stakes action with genuine comedy and even a little bit of romance involved as well on this whole massive like blockbuster scale. And while it's not the first action comedy to exist or anything, just the sheer size and just execution in this film really set a new bar, and I think influenced, a lot of films that would follow, attempting to kind of a similar tone to their films, and it showed that audiences would, embrace a film that could make them laugh or be shocked, feel a little bit of something about their own relationships, just all within that same 2 hours or whatever the runtime is of this movie. Um, and like I said, this they knew, I think, that this movie was going to be a huge hit at the box office and just, extremely financially successful. And it was. I mean, this was a massive financial success. Um, so I think the budget of this movie was around like $100 million. At the time, that was made it one of the most expensive films that had ever been made at that point. So this movie really needed to perform to kind of make up for that budget. And it did, and it grossed over $378 million worldwide. It proved that, Arnold's drawing power outside of those kind of established franchise roles like, Terminator and Conan and, all that. Um, you know, though, spy films were somewhat, familiar territory, just like the comedic family element was new though. Um, and just certain scenes and lines from True Lies are instantly recognizable, and they've entered pop culture, over the years. The whole tango scene, which it opens up the movie, and then there's also it's at when he's with Tia Carrera at the beginning, and then he does the whole tango scene at the end as well with Jamie Lee Curtis. And then there's her whole striptease dance scene that she does. When she's on her mission or whatever, and then just the bathroom brawl and just uh, the whole line that Arnold delivers at the end when he's fighting with the terrorist guy on that outside of that plane, and he just says you're fired, and then just he fires the missile the guy's holding on to, just launches it through the building into the other helicopter. Um, just all that stuff is just iconic moments, and not just this movie, but just all of '90s cinema. I think the film is definitely rewatchable. It holds up remarkably well. Thanks to like the practical effects and all the solid direction here from James Cameron. It just it set that bar for these kind of spy action movies, and sometimes the spy, like even the spoof movies. And what this is not even a spoof movie. I mean, not really. I mean, it's got like comedy and stuff in it, and it kind of does kind of like make fun a little bit of like certain like spy aspects of movies, but it definitely plays with all these like spy movie themes, while delivering a lot of this serious action. And this whole tone just kind of influenced, I think, later films, and aim for this kind of similar of mix of humor and the whole spy spectacle shit. You know what I mean? Um, but overall, I mean, True Lies is is an Arnold movie where he gets to do everything. He's the untouchable action hero. He's this kind of slightly clueless dad slash husband. Um, he's this like smooth operator, man. He's just the and he's full of those one liners as always within any Arnold movie. It's like a perfect storm of star power, and you throw in James Cameron into the mix, just amazing vision when it comes to directing, um, just really ambitious filmmaking here, and just it's a concept that allows for a shit ton of entertainment. So as an Arnold fan, yeah, thinking about it and talking about it now, like I said, this one might be in my top 10 for sure when it comes to Arnold movies. I mean, it's that good. It's and definitely if you're an Arnold fan, this movie is required viewing. You can't not watch this movie if you're an Arnold fan, um, because it just demonstrates his charisma and his capability beyond just being this muscle bound hero that everybody knows and for being. And it's an absolute highlight, I think, of his entire career. It's genuinely fun and exciting and hilarious, and just it never gets old. I mean, I always have a great time watching this. When I was watching this yesterday, um, there was a few things that I had forgot. So because it'd been a while since I've seen this, um, but there was a few things I had forgot, especially involving Bill Paxton's character. Um, just I was just finding myself laughing out loud like multiple times. I mean, especially there's a scene where they're going down the road because Bill Paxton's character Simon, he's like or Carlos, so he goes by the name Simon, but his real name is Carlos, and he's this like used car salesman. So there's this scene where like he's him and Arnold are like he has Arnold test drive this little car, this little convertible, and so he's like without him knowing who Arnold is, like, or in this case, the character Harry, he doesn't know who Harry is. He's telling about this kind of little thing. He's kind of scamming this woman and he's talking about Jamie Lee Curtis, Harry's wife, Helen, and like he's telling about how she's got nice titties and all this stuff. He's saying these absolutely filthy things about his wife, and so then like it kind of like it goes into this thing where Arnold like knocks him in the face, and it's like he just like crashes over, like blood's pouring from his face, but then it just kind of snaps back to reality, and you realize that was all just like a daydream in in Harry's mind. Just little things like that. It's so funny. I absolutely love it. So if you've never seen True Lies, definitely make time for it at some point. It's one that I don't think you'll regret watching. It's super fun. I love it. But that takes me to the next film now, which is the Stallone film that will be going up against True Lies, and this is a good one. I think this one is a extremely underrated film when it comes to Stallone's filmography. Um, and it was really tough for me, like to choose between. Like I know I can tell you who's going to win this because I've already looked at. I've tallied the votes up in the people that between these two, and it like I said, it doesn't matter at this point anyway because like I said, Arnold has won this series already as of last night. But when it comes to these two movies, this one was super tough for me. Like if I was just choosing by myself between these two, oh man, it's still super tough. Um, and because I love these movies almost the same, just in completely different reasons. Why? And this is Daylight, by the way, from 1996. And I've been a long time fan of Sylvester Stallone. Like I've told you guys about, I grew up watching watching him and his movies with my dad, and just Daylight. The movie Daylight really holds a special place. Like I said, it's. I don't think this movie gets talked about enough when it comes to Stallone's films. Um, because this one's a different kind of movie for Stallone, a different kind of fight, if you will. It's not in the ring or the jungle or deep, but or anything like that. But this time it takes place deep underground. Um, Pretty much like he's battling the very earth itself. And let me tell you, he brings every ounce of that signature grit that we know Stallone for, and that hard as well to this role. Um, so just picture this. So it's rush hour in New York City, and one of the major underwater tunnels connecting Manhattan to New Jersey. Um, let's just say a tunnel very much like the real life Holland Tunnel is packed with cars, and suddenly disaster strikes. There's this truck carrying this highly volatile waste while trying to evade a robbery. Crashes inside the tunnel, um, causing this whole chain reaction of these explosions, unlike anything that you'd seen up to that point when it comes to in film. And the tunnel entrances collapse, sealing off both ends, and inside, trapped, is this very diverse group of these survivors in this kind of crumbling and flooding, this burning tomb, and their oxygen is dwindling down minute by minute, and just this whole structural integrity is failing. So that's where we enter our hero of the story, Kit, which his name is Kit, and that's Sylvester Stallone, of course. And he's not a cop this time, surprisingly. We've talked about a lot of Stallone movies this week where he plays a cop, but he's not a cop. He's not a soldier, not a boxer or anything like that. This time he's this kind of this disgraced former chief of the New York City EMS, who was, forced out after this controversial incident years prior. Um, but he's the only one who knows this tunnel's layout, intimately, and it has that kind of deep down knowledge about like disaster response that no one else possesses. So while the authorities, above ground debate and, plan this kind of risky long shot options to try to get these people out of there, Kit sees these trap survivors, on the news feed, and his conscience is kind of nagging at him. So he volunteers to go in there through this, this unstable service shaft, which is basically like a suicide mission. Frankly, I mean, because he's just trying to get in there to try and lead these survivors out before the tunnel completely collapses or floods. So the film becomes this kind of very tense, very claustrophobic race against time. And Kit, must he's got to navigate, through this rubble and these rising water levels and these secondary explosions and excuse me, sorry. Uh, and this whole psychological toll of just leading a this group of people that are panicking and they're injured and they're just antagonizing him. Through this kind, it almost feels like an impossible situation. Um, it's just it's a classic disaster film setup. You know, kind of elevated by all these action sequences and just this force of nature that's just unfolding around all the characters in the film. Um, and the guy that's behind the camera here, this is the director here, is Rob Cohen, and Rob Cohen is, I think, uh, a director who really excels at delivering these very kinetic, large scale action spectacle films. If so, like if you're familiar with with the Fast and the Furious franchise, then you might know his work because he was the guy that directed the very first Fast and the Furious film back in 2001, and that launched this whole global phenomenon in films. And I'm not the biggest fan of those. I've only seen like the first couple films of the Fast and the Furious. I went like years and years without even seeing any of them, but I finally watched like the first two, the first one, and I think the second one was Tokyo Drift. Um, and they're pretty good. I liked what I seen of them. It's because I'm into all kinds of different types of films. And it's not something that they're my favorite or anything, but I know I understand the popularity of them though, and I understand why those films are so huge amongst a lot of people that that love those kind of movies. Um, but beyond all that, Cohen he directed this other movie called Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, which came out in 1993, and he also did The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor back in 2008, and oh, and Triple X with Vin Diesel, who was that came out in 2002, a year after the first Fast and the Furious. So he worked with Vin Diesel a couple different times, um, but he just has this whole knack, for creating these kind of dynamic visuals, and building these kind of intense set pieces, and just often working with a lot of practical effects, hand in hand with CGI as well to kind of achieve this grounded, visceral feel to the action, especially in his earlier films. And in Daylight, his skills are, I think, perfectly matched to that material that's presented here. He really makes that tunnel that they're in feel like this, almost like a character in itself, like this dangerous character. Kind of using these tight angles and just these practical effects, like the water, the fire, the fallen debris, just to kind of create this sense of being buried alive. Um, and his direction, I think, really keeps that tension high, and the pacing very brisk here, just ensuring that the audience is right there with Kit and the survivors, every step of the way. And like I said, as a Stallone fan, I'll tell you why I love this movie. Um, because it resonates in so many different ways. It showcases everything that we love about Stallone, just in a slightly different package here. You know, the character that he plays, Kit, he isn't like this invincible force of nature, uh, like John Rambo, or nor is he like this underdog boxer, rising against the odds. Um, he's just this skilled, professional who messed up, who carries this weight of this failure, this past failure, and he's just trying to seek redemption by helping these people that's trapped in this tunnel. And and when the chips are down here, who do you want coming for you through a collapsed tunnel? You want the guy, with the muscles, the determination, the refusal to quit, and just the heart to just risk everything for these strangers. That's really what you want when it comes to a film, especially a Stallone film. And just he really embodies that whole character beautifully. You see the effort, the strain, just the sheer like physicality, that's required to move through all this wreckage. And you just see him as this leader that emerges. He's not one who's not barking orders or anything, but he's just one, who's encouraging. He's protecting these people the best he can. Um, he's just inspiring them as well. Through all this action and this It's just absolutely fantastic movie. There's moments where you think, yeah, you look at Stallone in this movie, you say, "That's our guy, man. That's why he's one of the fucking all time greats." It's whether he's climbing through these impossible spaces. He's taking a hit or just giving a look that says, we're getting out of here. Stallone, he just sells everything and completely. And it's a film that really relies on that tangible, believable hero that navigates under these unbelievable circumstances. And Stallone is just one of the few actors that, in my opinion, that can pull that off with such conviction. It's pure like old school action hero stuff with just a good dose of like human drama. Um, Now Daylight, it didn't perhaps reach like the success that Rocky or Rambo or maybe a couple other films from Stallone, but I feel this one is really up there is one of my personal favorites from Stallone. I feel like this one is extremely underrated. Um, and when it comes to the whole like disaster film stuff, that whole kind of subgenre that was gaining popularity in the 90s, like with Twister, Dante's Peak, Volcano, Titanic. Um, I think that Daylight really stands, as this really well executed entry in that whole wave of disaster films. You know, um, it just that whole claustrophobic feeling, that's presented in this film to it's it feels grounded in, no pun intended, like because they're underground, but just it really feels grounded to as compared to those more sprawling, natural disasters that's presented in that subgenre. This movie really focused on this kind of contained environment, and just the whole dynamics of all the survivors that are seen here in the movie. It really it sets this movie apart, in my opinion, from all of those other disaster films from the 90s. Um, and this was following the success of Cliffhanger, which just came out just a few years prior to this. Um, so this was like a really different like phase of Stallone's career. He was, entering this phase of all these kind of high concept action roles like, Demolition Man, that which we talked about yesterday, and a couple movies that I didn't talk about this week, but like The Specialist, and Assassins that with Antonio Banderas. Um, but Daylight was a key film in this whole period of his career, I think. Because it really demonstrated his ability to kind of carry these big budget action films that were being presented in the 90s, that weren't tied to any kind of established franchises. And it really showed his range within the action genre, portraying this hero that's defined by skill and resilience, and rather than some kind of like military might like Rambo. um and I think, and I know I do a lot of comparisons to like Rocky and Rambo, but like you gotta understand why I do that, because those were the two biggest like franchises of his career, and some of the biggest films that he ever did. That's what he is ultimately known for. When you think of Sylvester Stallone, you either think of Rocky or you think of Rambo first and foremost. And I promise, guys, I will get to those movies eventually, here on the channel and talk about those. I had plans for them earlier in the year, just some stuff came up. I had to, move the schedule around and stuff, but I will get to those, and I can't wait till I do, because those will be a lot of fun for me to talk about, right? Because I love those movies so much. Um, but I guess in conclusion, for any Stallone fan that's looking for this kind of pure shot of the hero that we know and love facing this unprecedented challenge. Daylight is a movie you need to check out if you've never seen it. It's got the action, the suspense, and just more importantly, it's got Sylvester fucking Stallone. Put just he pushing these boundaries and just proving that even when he's buried miles underground with this whole group of survivors. Um, just the human spirit that Stallone always lets out in these movies. He it helps him find a way out, and just it's something that you have to see to uh, just to believe, because if you like those kind of movies from the 90s, then the like natural disaster stuff and just like the just everything like that, just those whole disaster movies in general. Um, Daylight is just essential to watch, I feel. So now it comes to the result, which one I like better. So the popular choice here from when I did a vote for these, from everybody else chose True Lies. So it was like unanimous. Everybody that voted chose True Lies between the Daylight and True Lies. Um, and like I said, these movies, I love them just the same in just their own different ways. But if I was like forced to make a decision, if I had to choose one out of these two, my gosh, that's so tough. I don't know. I probably have to go with True Lies as well, and I hate that's so hard for me to say too. You guys don't even understand because I love this movie Daylight so much. It's just like I just feel like it's just as good as True Lies. Just it's they're two completely different types of films. Um, but just I have to say that True Lies probably has that edge, and I'd have to go with it. So, what does that put the score right now? Like 7-2, Arnold. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next two movies and the last movies that we're going to be talking about this week in this whole Schwarzenegger versus Stallone series. Um, so the next one is another Schwarzenegger film. And this movie came out in the year 2000 and the new millennium. Well, it was the new millennium at the time. Um, you guys are guys that were around back then. You were maybe you were kids, maybe teenagers or whatever. When 2000 rolled around, you guys remember that whole Y2K bullshit and just how everybody thought that the world was going to end and like all the computers were going to crash and all these planes were going to fall out of the fucking sky and stuff like that. Like it's so insane looking back on that now, just how everything was like so many people were thinking like the internet is evil, and well, people this to this day still think the internet is evil, but you know what I mean? Like they thought that it was like the product of Satan or something, and like everything was going to be um, coming to an end in the year 2000. But thankfully, that did not happen. And there was people that thought for years too that 2012 was like this biblical thing where it was supposed to be the end of the world as well. But that's the thing. Like nobody knows. Nobody knows when the end of the world. There's only God and Jesus in heaven knows when that's going to be, and there's nobody on this earth that could tell you when the world's going to end. So anybody that tries to give you that bullshit, fuck them. Don't listen to that shit. Um, so anyway, back to the topic here at hand. This movie, The Sixth Day, came out in the year 2000, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, he has just had this incredible career, up to this point, and it's just I gotta tell you that one movie that doesn't always get the love that it deserves is this movie, The Sixth Day. Um, and because this movie is just solid Arnold sci-fi, hitting so many kind of sweet spots that I'm surprised that it's not talked about in the same breath as like Total Recall or some of the other like sci-fi movies, the Terminator films that that Arnold does. Um, so let's go ahead and dive into this movie, and I'll tell you from from a fan's perspective why I think this movie rules. Um, so what's this movie about, really? So it just think there are times where this movie does come off as kind of confusing. So I'm gonna try to explain this the best that I can. So just imagine a not too distant future, in the not too distant future. Yep, Mystery Science Theater 3000 reference. For anybody that didn't know what I was talking about there. But in this movie, it's the year 2015. But from the perspective of the film being in the year 2000. So, of course, we're far beyond the year 2015 now. So, nothing that happened in this film, uh, well, yet I guess nothing has come to fruition yet. But who's to say it won't? Um, but like I said, this is the year 2015 here, where cloning is a thing, and cloning does exist. I mean, they really did like clone a sheep or whatever like years ago. I can't remember when it was, like the 90s or something like that. I don't know, but this is where they're cloning humans and stuff in this movie. There's this kind of huge uh, you know, catch though that human cloning is illegal. Animals, sure, you can clone your dead dog and instantly, at the mall, a place called Repet, where so it'll just basically like clone DNA from your dead pet and give you a new pet, like it looks exactly the same like your pet that died, and just or with food like produce, like you can clone your favorite apple tree, but humans, that's absolutely forbidden in this story. So, and the reason why is because as the movie touches upon, it messes with just the fundamental ideas of having a soul and an identity and just immortality. So our main character here, Adam Gibson, which is played by Arnold, is this kind of seemingly normal pilot for this futuristic charter company, and he has a close friend and a partner named Hank, who's played by Michael Rappaport here, and he's always a just just kind of bringing this very cynical energy with every character that he plays. Um, so one day, Hank asked Adam to swap shifts for this job flying this rich tech mogul, um, Michael Drucker, to this unnamed location. So Adam initially, refuses because it's his daughter's birthday, but Hank, well, let's just say Hank is persistent. So he so Adam eventually takes the job. And here's where everything starts to go sideways in this most sci-fi Arnold um this most sci-fi Arnold way, that's possible. When Adam returns home, he discovers that he's already there. So there's another Adam Gibson that's celebrating, his daughter's birthday, blowing out the candles with his family. Just this is just totally mind blowing to him. He's been cloned without even knowing it. So from this whole like kind of moment of confusion, the movie explodes into this like thrilling conspiracy. Adam realizes that he's walked into the middle of this secret human cloning operation, and it's run by this Drucker guy and this this kind of sketchy corporation, which is led by this Dr. Griffin Weir, who's played by Robert Duvall. Um, and just all the corporate guys here, immediately try to eliminate, the original Adam Gibson because, he's living proof that they are illegally cloning humans and even worse, kind of doing it accidentally to people like him. Um, So the whole core plot of this movie becomes Adam trying to survive, and figure out which one he is. Is he the original? Is he the clone? And he's trying to protect his family, who's also now in danger. He's trying to expose Drucker's operation. But the film just kind of plays with these themes of identity. If you meet your perfect clone, who are you? You know what I mean? Um, so what defines a human? Is it memories, experiences, a soul? It also kind of delves into these dangers of just like of corporate power and technology running wild without these kind of ethical boundaries. Um, just the concept of like syncing these memories and skills into a new clone body is just this kind of really fascinating sci-fi um, mechanic that really drives a lot of the plot here and raises a lot of questions. But don't worry. I mean, this movie is not all just it's not all philosophical. So Arnold is still on hand for these classic action that he's known for. Helicopter chases, hand to hand combat. Escaping these kind of relentless assassins, and just really navigating this whole world where technology is both a tool and a threat. And the director here is Roger Spottiswoode, and so I talked about Roger Spottiswoode a few nights ago because he was also the director of Stopper My Mom Will Shoot with Sylvester Stallone. Um, and I talked a little bit about some films that he worked on and everything, and I didn't mention The Sixth Day. Uh, I did that on purpose because I wanted to talk about it again because I knew I was going to be talking about The Sixth Day later in the week. But one film that I forgot that he directed, and it was actually his directorial debut, which is one of the most underrated slashers from the 1980s that stars Jamie Lee Curtis, and that's Terror Train. I completely had forgot um, that he directed that. And also, I talked about another Arnold movie a few nights ago, Red Heat. So Walter Hill was the director of that. But something I forgot to mention was that Roger Spottiswoode was the writer of Red Heat. Um, I'm pretty sure that he also wrote the story for Aliens as well, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so he's worked with James Cameron, he's worked with Walter Hill, he's worked with some of the best directors out there, and he's a director himself. So like, yeah, I mean, and he's just known for a lot of these kind of politically charged thrillers and action films. But like I said, he's done horror too. Like that was his very first film. He did a slasher movie called Terror Train. And if you haven't seen Terror Train, I definitely recommend that one. And that's one I'll probably be covering later this year, probably towards the end of the year because of where it does kind of the setting is around New Year's Eve and all that. But let's be honest here. I mean, from a fan's perspective, The Sixth Day is great. I think it's an absolutely great film. Um, but it wasn't like this Terminator level phenomenon at the box office, or really even like a critical darling to a lot of fans. When it came out, um, it just it the success from the box office, it performed kind of moderately. It wasn't like this smash hit or anything. There were a lot of reviews that were mixed on it. Um, often kind of praising the concept and Arnold, but sometimes really just kind of criticizing the execution or predictability of it. But I just think that's what I love about it. I thought this movie was so fun, and just a lot of fans like myself, fans of the kind of like that whole smart, technology based, sci-fi action. Um, I think the impact of this movie is arguably one of the more significant than like the initial reception suggests, and I'll tell you, and here's why. So I feel like this was a really strong entry, in Arnold's kind of sci-fi repertoire of films that he did. Um, it really cemented him as this kind of sci-fi action star, of his whole era, because it came after Terminator and Total Recall, The Running Man, and Predator, and just this film showed that he was still capable of anchoring these really intelligent, concept-driven sci-fi films. Um, and I think it's arguably probably his last truly significant sci-fi leading role, before he would go into a political career. Um, and this was pre Terminator 3, which felt more like a just a sequel obligation. I'm not really even that a big fan of Terminator 3. But just this movie, The Sixth Day, it demonstrated, his kind of willingness to tackle these complex ideas that were wrapped in this kind of action package. Um, and just the film's core themes about human cloning, artificial intelligence, that corporate control, over life and death, and just that very definition, of identity. It really feels relevant in a lot of ways, and to today's culture, uh, than what it did back in the year 2000. Because there's all these advancements now in genetic engineering and AI, and just discussions about around kind of digital consciousness. Social media is fucking taking over everything. Um, the 6 days questions about copying life and what it means to be you really resonates deeply. It was ahead of its time, and it's exploring these kind of these ethical themes, in this kind of mainstream context. Um, and just the visual effects that are used to create the two Arnolds interacting in the film were really, state of the art for the year 2000. Um, while maybe not seamless by today's standards with like the deep faking stuff and all the, the well, sometimes that shit doesn't look that great because like when they deep faked Ian Holmes' face on the body in Alien Romulus. That didn't look that great, but the effects that they use here this is the year. I remind you, the year 2000. They were really impressive. I think it was really crucial to the film's kind of central premise too. Um, it really pushed these technological boundaries for replicating actors on screen. Um, that definitely been done in the past, but it always was definitely in a way where you could tell that it was fake. But it's done so well, especially for the year 2000. They're like side by side. It looks like there's really two Arnolds. It's super cool, to go back and watch and just know that this film came out 25 years ago now. Um, so happy 25th anniversary to the Sixth Day. Um, but in conclusion, I guess this movie, it while it may not have like reshaped cinema history or anything, or even be a masterpiece, you know, it's it's just a really super entertaining, super fun sci-fi action film that features the GOAT, Arnold Schwarzenegger. It just tackled all these kind of complex ethical questions, years before it became a mainstream discussion. And it's just for anybody that loves that kind of movies, just kind of like that where you have to think about things, and then you also there's that bronze side of it where there's a lot of like action and just fighting sequences, stuff that Arnold perfected and was really known for. Um, this movie is just incredible in my opinion, and so it's another one of those. If you're an Arnold fan, if you're just a sci-fi fan in general, definitely check out The Sixth Day. And this now brings me to the very last movie of this week's series, Schwarzenegger versus Stallone. And much like Daylight, this movie is another absolutely extremely underrated film. Now, some people would say that I've talked to would say this is not an underrated film. They say this is just exactly where it needs to be. There's people that say it is one of Stallone's greatest films of all time, and I would definitely agree with that. I think that this movie is absolutely wonderful, and but it's just, but I just being honest with you, when I talk to people about Stallone films, this is one that I rarely hear people bring up. But it also does have a massive fan base, from other people out there as well. And this is Copland from the year 1997. And so, yeah, we're talking about another movie where Sylvester Stallone plays a cop. But I'm telling you guys, stick with me. This is one of his best ones of him playing a cop. It may be the best movie that he where he plays a cop, other than Cobra. Um, and I feel like this is a really crucial movie in his career. A performance that just proved to the world that and maybe even to himself that he is far, far more than just an action icon. So this film, I think, is absolutely fantastic. And for fans like us, it's I think it's essential viewing as if you're a Stallone fan. And so let me go ahead and break it down for you. So the movie takes place in this town called Garrison, New Jersey, and it's a company town, but the company is the NYPD. It's it's this very sleepy kind of idyllic bedroom community right across the river from New York City, and it's populated almost entirely by these New York City police officers who moved there for cheaper housing and just this quiet life away from the big city. So they built their own little world here, this almost like a sanctuary. And the film centers around this guy named Freddie Heflin, who is played by uh, Sylvester Stallone here, and Freddie is the local sheriff of Garrison, New Jersey. But he's not just this tough gunslinging lawman. He not at all. I mean, he's not really, that that typical character that you would think Stallone would be. He's not that at all. Freddie is this like overweight, kind of soft spoken, partially deaf in one ear from this incident that happened years ago that pretty much ended his NYPD dreams, and just kind of deeply overshadowed by these big city cops who live in his town. So he like idolizes them. He sees them as the heroes, as the real deal. And his job is mostly like chasing these speeders and dealing with domestic disputes, just really small stuff. And so he's effectively like powerless and largely ignored by the NYPD elite, who call uh, Garrison, New Jersey, their home. So you can already see what I mean. Like this is a very different role than what we're used to with Sylvester Stallone, um, and just the whole tension of all this, it ignites with this kind of seemingly straightforward incident. So there's this late night bridge chase involving um, this hot-headed young officer who's played by Michael Rappaport. Again, like we just talked about, he was in The Sixth Day with Arnold Schwarzenegger. But all this with him goes horribly wrong, resulting in all these multiple deaths. And the NYPD cops in Garrison, which is led by this very deeply corrupt, powerful veteran detective named Ray Donlin, who's played by Harvey Keitel here. He does a fucking amazing, incredible job in this. Um, but he's there to kind of quickly attempt to cover up this incident to protect, their own or whatever. So Freddie, being the local lawman that he is, gets drawn into all of this. And initially, he wants to believe that these men he looks up to are just making a mistake or victims of circumstance or whatever. But as things start to unravel, fueled by this kind of internal affairs investigator from the city, which is played by Robert De Niro, again, I'm fucking amazing. Um, just he starts sniffing around and his own growing unease and sense of justice. Freddie starts to see the rot beneath the surface of this beloved town. It's a place built on a foundation of corruption and backroom deals and cops protecting other cops, no matter the crime. So the film is kind of a slow burn. It's very character driven, crime drama about this seemingly weak guy, finding his courage, and Freddie is very passive for much of the movie, kind of struggling with that loyalty and fear and just, this idealized view of the police. Um, but as the walls close in and corruption, becomes undeniable, he's forced to confront this ugly truth about the men that he admired and decide if he has what it takes to stand up against them. Even if it costs him everything. And all of this culminates in this very tense, old school Western style showdown in the streets of Garrison. And I mean, this movie is absolutely amazing. Just not just as a Stallone film, but as just as a cop film, as a drama. I mean, everybody in this movie is fantastic, from Stallone to Harvey Keitel to Robert De Niro. I mean, there's so many things that I could say about this film. It's absolutely amazing. The atmosphere in this film is thick with tension. Just a sense of claustrophobia at times too. Just despite the kind of suburban setting, um, because everything within that setting, it really feels like it's lived in and depressingly real. Uh, and like the supporting cast, like I said, it's insane. Robert De Niro, Harvey Keitel, Ray Liotta, Janine Garofalo's in this, Robert Patrick. So yeah, Robert Patrick comes back. He worked with I say he comes back, but he was primarily known for working with Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2, and he has a cameo in Last Action Hero when he's coming out of the police office. So I think this might have been the first time that Robert Patrick was working with Sylvester Stallone. So it's really interesting to see that too. And but that whole supporting cast, they really create this very believable, you know, uh, this community of just these dangerous men, and all of this is just so wrapped into this fantastic film thanks to this man named James Mangold. And let me tell you, this guy is a serious filmmaker. So, at the time of Copland, he was relatively new, having only directed, a couple things before this, I think. But Copland was really like his breakout into bigger films. Even though it still had like this kind of independent spirit to it. But he would go on to be this amazing, amazing filmmaker, because he's known for films that are often kind of, character focused, gritty, and just have this strong sense of place and tone. Um, and so let's go ahead and look at some of his filmography, since he made Copland. So a couple of years after Copland came out, he did this movie called Girl Interrupted with Angelina Jolie, where she won an Oscar for that film. And then a few years later, in 2003, he did a movie called Identity with John Cusack, which is another amazing movie. Ray Liotta's in that one as well. Jake Busey, just a ton of people. That's a great film. Identity, you need to check that out for sure. A couple years later, he did Walk the Line, the Johnny Cash biopic with um, Joaquin Phoenix and Reese Witherspoon, and Reese Witherspoon won an Oscar for that film. And Joaquin Phoenix, I don't think he won an Oscar, but I think he was nominated. Um, and then he did the 310 to Yuma film in 2007. Then a couple Marvel movies as well, The Wolverine in 2013, and then Logan in 2017. Um, just to name a few, but you know, so James Mangold is a director who consistently delivers quality. And quality films with a very strong story and compelling characters. So even though this was one of his earlier films, I feel like he was just the absolutely perfect choice to do this film. Um, because he, from the get go, understood how to build tension, how to create this believable world, and just guide an actor like Stallone to a performance that was just outside his kind of typical nature of acting, and he really recognized that potential in that character, Freddie Heflin, and just in that he knew that Stallone would perfectly embody that. Um, and I think the whole Stallone revelation with this film is really the most significant impact from this film, because before Copland, Stallone was just firmly cemented as an action superstar. While he'd done dramas too, like early in his career, uh, with even like the Rocky films. I mean, those are some of his most dramatic cores of his earlier films. But by the '90s, he was Rambo, he was Cobra, Demolition Man, Judge Dredd, um, but Copland was this very deliberate and very brave, like pivotal point of his career. Stallone, you know, I think they said that he gained like 40 pounds or something for the role in this movie. So he really went all out to kind of physically transform himself to play this kind of overweight character of Freddy. And you know, this was just I feel like this was dedication to that character. Just critics and audiences who had kind of pigeonholed him, for years were now taking notice, like, oh wow, what is this? What is he's doing a very different role here. And just in his performance as Freddie Heflin was, I think widely praised, often called one of the best of his career up to that point. Because he showed this almost like this nuance about him and this vulnerability and just really a lot of emotional depth that was kind of rarely seen in his action roles. So Copland, proved that it was you know it proved definitively that Stallone could act. Alongside legends like De Niro and Keitel, and really hold his own. Um, because while De Niro and Keitel weren't action stars, they were on that same level of stardom that Stallone was. So yeah, so it's just this is an incredible movie, incredible cast, incredible story, um, and just this movie really opened doors for Stallone. While he didn't immediately jump on into like a string of dramatic roles, it it added this kind of crucial dimension to his resume. It proved that his willingness to take risk and his capability beyond explosions and one-liners. It really showed producers and directors that he had all this range in his acting ability. Um, I think it arguably made him a more interesting actor in the long run, allowed him to explore these different types of roles later, or bring more dramatic weight to his action films, like the later Rocky Balboa or the Creed films. Um, it really countered the story that he was just this physical presence or whatever. Um, and again, like this movie just has a incredible cast to it. I mean, I can't say that enough. I mean, just getting De Niro and Keitel and Liotta, Stallone all together in this one movie, this crime drama, was just really an incredible event. It just it really, this film serves as just kind of like a snapshot of some of the best actors of their generation working together, just bringing this raw, authentic energy, to the screen. Um, so, so yeah, I mean, to me, Copland is a huge milestone in, to for Stallone's career, and it's just a testament to that range that he has as an actor. Um, I think it's a fantastic crime drama with this excellent cast, brilliant director. Um, if you call yourself a Stallone fan and you haven't seen this, you need to drop what you're doing and watch it. You need to go and check this movie out for yourself. You'll definitely like not just myself but other fans. You'll see the heart, the struggle, and everything that makes us love Stallone. If you're a huge Stallone fan like myself, but in a way that you might never have expected. So yeah, this movie is absolutely magnificent and highly recommend it. And when it comes down to it, I think this was unanimous as well on the vote, and it's definitely my vote. Uh, I choose this one definitely over the 6 day. Um, and so, what does that put the score at now? Like 7-3 or something like that. So that's your final score, I guess. But like I said, it doesn't really matter because you know even though like I see Arnold as the goat, as my favorite actor of all time, my number one. Um, just Stallone could still be right on that same level with Arnold, and that's the way it's always going to be. I mean, people are definitely going to have their favorites between the two. Mine being Arnold, people at their favorite being Stallone. But that's the thing. That's why both these guys are legends. That's why this is will always be endless. This almost what started out as kind of a malicious rivalry in the '80s, which has now just become this kind of friendly and the rivalry between these guys, just knowing that both their fan bases are just so passionate, um, and that's why I think for as as the years go on and generations and generations and generations pass, these guys will always be known. They made themselves legends in the 1980s and into the 1990s and all the way to the present day. These guys are absolute living legends. And I'm just, so happy that I grew up in a time on this earth that these guys were, establishing their own careers and just all these movies were coming out. So, I feel very blessed to be a part of that time in history on Earth, uh, where these guys just were as popular as they were, in the '80s and '90s and so forth. So yeah, gotta love Arnold Schwarzenegger. Gotta love Sylvester Stallone. To me, in my opinion, to the all time absolute greats. and that's coming from any genre of film. They are two of the absolute all-time greats. Um, but that's it, guys. That is the end of the series for this week. Schwarzenegger versus Stallone. For all of you that checked out all these videos, or just a couple of the videos that I did in this series, hope you guys had as much fun watching them and listening to them as I did watching these movies and talking about them. Um, I definitely may revisit this again in the future with more Schwarzenegger and Stallone films to talk about. I guess we'll have to see when it comes to that. Like I said, because there is so many more films out there from both actors that there is to talk about. Especially, I've not talked about the Rocky and the Rambo films yet, so I will get around to that for sure. Um, but got a big weekend. Other than well, let me before I get into that, just want to say again, thanks guys. Just this has been a lot of fun. Talking about these films and everything from Schwarzenegger to Stallone, and just hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I have. But now I guess I'll get into it. So big weekend coming up for me. So I gotta and I was late. It's actually 1:01 a.m. Eastern time right now. Um, so as soon as I get done with this stream, I'm heading to bed. I gotta be up and out of here at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to Knoxville, Tennessee tomorrow to FrankenCon. Joe Bob Briggs is going to be there. I've got my Joe Bob shirt on tonight, and Darcy, she's going to be there as well. Um, and Rhonda Shear, Michael Berryman, Dee Wallace, Danny Pitaro, a little Cujo reunion thing they got going on, Kelly Maroney. So I may do a video like next week or something. Like I said, I was gonna be taking a break. I won't be taking a break from like the 500 movies in 2025 series, but I still may do like little sporadic videos or something here and there over the next 2 weeks on the channel while I'm taking a break from the 500 movies in 2025. Um, so I may do like a little small FrankenCon video next week, just kind of showing some pictures or just talk about things from the event. Um, so yeah, that's gonna be a lot of fun. And so I'm going there with my friend Brad tomorrow, and so we're only going to probably be there like a few hours. And then tomorrow night is WWE Backlash. So if you're a wrestling fan, don't forget about that. That's going to be a lot of fun. Um, on Sunday is Mother's Day. So I am going to be doing a live stream on Sunday for a Mother's Day special. There's going to be 3 movies I'm going to be talking about on that. Um, and then, like I said, after I finish up with the Mother's Day special, I'm going to be taking a break from the 500 movies in 2025 series. From the streams, at least, I'm probably still going to be watching movies within those 2 weeks. But just I'm not going to be doing a stream for the series for like about 2 weeks, and then I'll come back on Memorial Day, which is May the 26th, I think. Um, so that's when I'll be back. Um, but yeah, so just and the reason I'm taking a break is just because like there's a lot of stuff going on right now at home with my job and stuff. So I gotta kind of relax it a little bit, so just kind of take back. But I think it's it's really going to help me in the long run. It's going to help me to not get burnt out from all this. Not that I'm getting burnt out or anything, because this is a lot of fun. I love doing this, every week. But just like I said, I do have a life outside of this. I have a family, I have a job, all that. So I gotta take some time and kind of like there's a lot of housework and stuff I gotta do. We're doing a lot of remodeling right now here at the house, so that takes a lot of time and effort. Alongside just having to kind of like write out these reviews and just do these streams and everything. So you guys understand what I'm saying. But 2 weeks is not that long. But I will definitely be back. I said like it'll be the first video back will be like the Memorial Day special that I'll be doing. So I believe again I think that's on May the 26th. But I guess, guys, that's it for me tonight. I really appreciate all of you guys who uh, were here on the stream live. My buddy James, I seen Pop was in here. I'm seeing now my buddy Daniel that shows up from time to time here in the streams. So yeah, thanks, man. This was a fun show to talk about. Just this whole week of all these Schwarzenegger and Stallone movies was a lot of fun to talk about. Just glad that you were able to stop by. Um, Oh, you love the shirt. Yeah. Oh, thanks, man. I'm a huge Joe Bob Briggs fan. I think me and you talked about him a lot when we were in school and stuff. And I have all kinds of different Joe Bob shirts. I've wore several ones in the past here on the streams and stuff. Um, but but guys, yeah, like just again, like I said, I appreciate all of you for checking out this video and all the other videos that I've done this past week and just in the past on the channel in general. Uh, just means so much to me that you all take time out of your all's schedule just to kind of check these videos out. So yeah. Um, and anybody that's watching this on the replay, you want to thank you guys as well. And you'll definitely, if you know anyone that loves these types of videos, that loves uh, doing discussions on film, just let them know. Get the word out about the channel so we can bring more people in here into the chat when I do these live streams and we can talk about these films. Um, and just if you liked any of the movies that I talked about tonight, drop me a comment below on what your favorite of those films are, or just or whatever you want to talk about. I'll be more than happy, and I'll try to get back to every comment that you guys put. So just whenever I have the time, and if you like this video, as always, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that. And if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button to catch more videos from me like this one. Um, and as always, click that bell for any kind of future notifications as well. But I guess with all that said, um, I'm Crater. This is Crater Mania. I love you guys. Have a good night.